Right, so here is another episode of the Corporate Elephant, and today I'm here with Alex, straight from the US. Hi, Alex, how are you?
Good morning or good evening. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Today we are talking about silence at work. This is the Corporate Elephant, and this is massive. But before we get on with that, Alex, do you want to introduce your company, DX Learning, and what you do there?
I can do that very briefly. It's real simple. DX was formed in April 2015, and our primary purpose is to wipe out bad leadership, reduce narcissism, and send people home less stressed than when they came by hopefully triggering the self-awareness and making leaders realize that they got work to do.
Oh, yes, definitely. They do have work to do. And they have work to do in terms of people speaking up and the silence, right? So I understand your job is very similar to mine with the Strengths Company. I also do trying to get rid of bad leadership in terms of, so many aspects. And one of the aspects is really the silence. And one domain of why people don't speak, and this is one of your topic also, is the psychological safety. Do you want to define it very quickly just for this purpose of this conversation and go from there?
Yeah, I'll start with Amy Edmondson's top researcher's definition, which is the shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. So to depack that, which is sort of the go-to definition, really it's in a team environment, whether that's a group of 4 people at home, a partner and 2 kids, or work with 10 people, or any group of people, or a soccer team. In that team, a person feels comfortable, i.e. my brain is in a good place where I can talk about what's important. I can speak up about issues and concerns that I have about myself and my team. I feel I can be open and vulnerable, and I can really be my true, authentic self. I don't have to fake it till I make it. So therefore, the psychological safety is my brain feels in a cognitive place where it can speak up about what's important, and I feel I can be my true self.
Absolutely. And there is a physiological and a chemical base for psychological safety as well in the brain, right? I always just say, when we talk about psychological safety, I'm like, you are not scared to speak up. There are no consequences. And basically this is in plain English. There are no consequences. You can tell me anything you want to. And this is where it gets very, very tricky. And I give you an example. So let's talk about the cultural aspect, and then we can go from there. Why people don't speak up? First of all, there is the cultural aspect. I live here in Dubai. We have 200 nationalities working together, living together. I think we beat everybody, even the States, I swear to God. We have literally everyone here. And we are very peaceful, we work, we collaborate very well. But there are things that even HR, when we, HR practices, sometimes you say that best practice. Well, I always dispute that. I'm like, appropriate practice, because what is the best for you is not best for us. So for example, engagement surveys, 360s don't work in an environment where there is a hierarchical structure. People come from a hierarchical structure, and the power distance is massive. So for Europeans, the power distance, we don't really care what is your title, who you are, we're just going to tie you. Now, people coming from these countries where power distance is really big, they will not say, because that is disrespect for them. This is, is literally challenging the leadership. That's not something. And also they are raised in the family that you don't speak back to or talk back to your parents. So it's coming from home, really. So how do we deal with that? Because for me, is when I train leaders here, and I will give you a very specific example. So let's take one of my previous places. The department was falling apart, and my GM goes, "Can you go and do something?" Do something. I'm like, okay. And I always know the temperature in the hotel, every single department, I know what the problems are. I'm always with them. And I'm like, okay, the problem here is that the leader is not listening whatsoever. And here there was a very different dynamic, because you had kind of a mix of Eastern European, Arabic team that you don't need to ask them twice to start speaking up. And you had another nationality as a leader. And for that leader, you speaking to your managers, it's a no-no, or you challenging the management. So I made him, we called a meeting, another meeting, facilitated. I'm like, okay, what we are going to do, I told the leader, like, we're going to listen together. So we sat down, team all over, we were in one of the suites in the hotel. And I'm like, your job here in the next 1 hour or so is nothing else, just to listen. And don't respond. Don't say anything. Guess how it ended up? The guy interrupted them constantly. At some point, he stood up and he left the room. He could not take. And one of the reasons we don't speak up, and that is also cultural, of course, but one of the reasons we don't speak up, because we understand very quickly that the leader doesn't have the character to take the truth. The leader doesn't know what to do with the information. And I think this is where we, L&D professionals, can come into the picture, which I helped the guy through. It was painful exercise, but helped him to listen, because if you stop listening and your team realizes that, they will stop talking. What's your experience about that?
Thank you. I think it goes way deeper than that. So I think this is a cultural problem more so than an L&D problem. And then L&D's job is to help support the culture. So let me be really honest. If your culture doesn't support the behaviors of psychological safety, then this is a complete waste of time. So I say that because culture is a mirror of leadership. So the culture of a company is essentially a mirror of leadership. And therefore leadership is really dictated to you by what you value, right? What you value. If you value humans, if you value listening, then you will listen. And what you value drives how you behave. So you talked about, cultural norms, for example. So some countries do not value listening. They just don't value it. Not through bad intentions. It's just, it is what it is. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's right. So we in corporations have the wonderful opportunity of going, look, even if we live in an Asian culture that doesn't respect this, or a European culture that doesn't respect this, whatever that is, doesn't stop the company by saying, look, you come to work here, you are going to value curiosity. So if you value curiosity, that means one of your behaviors is going to be to listen. And if you listen, we'll reward you. And if you don't listen, we'll consequence you. And if you keep not listening, you're out of here. So I truly believe you can train on this stuff, but if you don't value it, it's not going to happen. So I think the biggest problem that we've got to solve is getting corporations and the executive teams, because it starts right at the top, to create the cultural systems and processes in order to get the behaviors that we need to create psychological safety, because people just will not speak up unless their brain gets certain cravings. There's a lot of research and science behind this, which, again, I'm not going to speak my mind unless I'm treated in a certain way, which is great. We just need to start treating people like human beings. Go figure.
Yeah, absolutely. And fear is massive in people not speaking up. Everybody says, when I ask people, why don't you speak up? Oh, I don't want to get into trouble. That's the first response. That's the most common response that I receive. And even when I open up platforms sometimes to speak up, because my company really values listening. I mean, we have the processes, we have the system, we have the values, but it's once again, the company values on the wall and the company values that we live every single day is sometimes very different. So the company can tell you these are the values, but what is missing is the consequences. As you said, that, okay, what do we do with you if you're not following the company values, right? Yeah. So when there is no consequences, and I think this is where we could train people much better. And educate them in a way that tell us And once I listened to you, and you know that there will be no consequences. That's how you train people on the long term, not in a one workshop. That's just an awareness, right? And fear. Let's go back to fear, because even when I open up platforms sometimes for the colleagues, they will tell me everything. I have very close relationship with employees all the time, because then I know how to manage the leaders around them, so I don't need to end up in confrontation. But even when we have the opportunity, they will not do it. They will not do it. And this is a struggle, because if you have no information as a company, how on earth are you going to address an issue?
I mean, that's the simple equation. And again, the research would tell you a company that is psychologically safe, or a team that's psychologically safe, will outperform the one that doesn't. Why? Because we've been open and honest with each other, which means that we can do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff. It's a really simple equation.
Absolutely.
But takes I think you said it earlier. So here, the biggest problem is vulnerability and growth mindset. The number one contributing factor to psychological safety is a vulnerable leader. If they're not vulnerable, then the team won't be vulnerable, because it takes vulnerability to speak up. So what's the opposite of vulnerability? It's ego. That drives fear. And you've got NASA in the 80s. Unfortunately, people lost their lives in Columbia and Challenger because they had a very controlling, fearful organization. Winterkorn was a fearful CEO at VW, as a European example. Look what happened to them, Dieselgate. Time and time again, you'll see fear-driven organizations with egocentric, narcissistic people. They don't win. So we've got to go against what's the ego killer is vulnerability. And we've got to get, again, that's probably a cultural challenge for many places. Is to be vulnerable is just goes against the grain, especially when you get outside of places like Europe and America, and South America, especially, again, cultural norms. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's almost expected to be vulnerable. And go figure, especially in South America, the more vulnerable you are, the more open and honest you are, because if you speak up, I'll speak up. So there's a few, you can rewire people on these things. This is all why you and I are in business, because these can all be trained. We can all develop. No one was born to lead. No, scientifically speaking, no one was born to lead. We're born with the ability to survive. We're still survival creatures. We're still trying to survive, and therefore our instincts are to keep me alive. So we're all narcissists at the end of the day, and we're all selfish, self-centered human beings until we're told otherwise, and trained and developed and created an environment. So our biggest job is to try and get people to be more selfless versus their instincts of being selfish, and just by that change of mindset alone, we'll start to open up people's. Oh well, if I feel like I'm going to be treated with good intent, I am more likely to lean into being vulnerable and open and honest and psychologically safe.
Absolutely. And I think this is the problem that we're having, that we don't invest in these programs. And it's not necessarily a training program. Is literally, you know how long I spent with that guy? Probably 5 months by the time he learned how to, and I was in his meetings. I was talking to him, because this is when the big work starts, right? Okay, let's collect information in any way we want, right? Because what we need is information. Like how you do it, I don't really care.
Yep.
But then the leaders, when they start reading it out, this is when they need somebody to help them. And this is what we don't have. So we fail people, we fail the colleagues, because we don't prepare the leaders. And therefore they fear that I cannot speak up. And even when they have a leader who would allow them to speak up, they already been trained by the previous boss, but in the previous job, that, oh, don't say anything. I can tell you an example that in one of my places, one day I'm like in the HR office and I'm looking around and I'm like, doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to go into details. And I looked around, the 4 of my colleagues, I'm like, guys, this is wrong what we are doing. And they go like, silently nodding. And I'm like, we need to talk about it. And they go, oh, leave it. I'm like, this is illegal what we are doing. And they said, don't do anything. I did, but that's Sylvia, because for me, it's like, fire me. I'm not going to do the bad things, the wrong, like, what are you going to do to me? And sometimes that, everybody needs to pay the bills. Yep. So that also comes into the picture, why people are scared. And also, I wanted to add one thing, and don't ask me what the source is, because I just quoted it yesterday, so I need to look at it. Gen Z, they don't go into confrontation. They rather leave the workplace. So for them, or with them, how are we going to communicate if they don't even want to have a back and forth? Because the older generation, for example, you and I, we are open for debate. We welcome that. That is productive. What are we going to do with the young ones if we train them that you can leave anytime? Because that's the culture we have created in the past 15 years or so.
You touched the nerve there. So I'm 45, soon to be 45, so I'm Gen X. I despise my people. Let me tell you why. I was born into a world where you just stiff upper lip, as they say in the UK. You just get your head down and do the work. There's no questioning the work. There's mistreatment. There's you just do it at all costs. And it was okay. It was okay. That when you're born into it, it's okay. I love what Gen Z are doing. They are leaving. They're not leaving for any other reason apart from the fact they can't stand to be mistreated, and nor should they ever be. So it's like generations are all different. We're different because we're who we're born into and our parents. I will protect and I respect the Gen Zs for what they're doing. They're leaving because they don't want to be treated or mistreated as we were. And it was accepted that, we speak up. We're probably bruising in the way that we speak up. We're probably overcritical, and we say things that probably drive people to not speak up because we're sometimes too direct on our generation. Not right, not wrong. Again, cultural norms. You have country cultural norms, generational cultural norms. Again, I always say, and I've worked with cultures that have done things for thousands of years, and I said, who cares? Just because you did it for 2,000 years doesn't mean it's right. The world changes every generation. So we either adapt and become more agile to those around us, or we don't adapt and they reject us. And right now, what you're seeing is they're rejecting us, and rightly so. And I do. So we do. And again, when it comes to training, the toughest part of what we have to do is we've got to train people like me, with the grey head people, to start leading in a way in which the young people will go, ooh, I like this. And it starts at the top. We spend so little of our training dollars, especially in America, on soft skills for executives, about strategy and Excel spreadsheets and how to buy companies and all this crap, and send them to MBA school, and they teach you more about finances by some professor who knows nothing about human beings whatsoever. In fact, hates human beings. That's why they're a professor. It's like we've got to get into the soft skills. We've got to get into emotional intelligence. We've got to change the old people like me and above to become way more empathetic, way more inclusive than we were ever even trained to be, or the anti, because our parents couldn't stand it. My parents were not inclusive and were not empathetic, did not care. Just get your head down, do the job, shut up, and you're going to be okay. Fine. But that's them. That's not now. And I think that's that. We've got to get people into the right mindset that the world has changed, more so over the last 5 years. We've got to change with it. So it's no wonder they're not speaking up.
But this is the problem, that we don't have anybody within organization to narrate that differences. Because we know, he is different, they are different, and that's it. Everybody is struggling. But there is nobody to go to that leader, go to those young generation. I love young generation. I love mothering them. I don't know, that's just me. I just shepherd them around me, and they do whatever you want them to do. They are fantastic. But we don't have that support. And I always try to give that kind of support to the leaders. I'm like, look, they operate very differently. Don't do that to them. ABC, but also explaining to the other side and mediating that, hey, they operate differently. So you guys going to have to find the common ground in here and meet halfway, because.
But isn't that what you just said is the drop the mic moment, which is stop treating people how you want to be treated and start treating people how they want to be treated. That's empathy and that's inclusion. And that alone changes everything. But of course, we're hardwired, again, from a scientific point of view, to treat people how I want to be treated and surround myself with people like me, the similar to me bias. There's 165 or so biases in the brain, which are all designed to keep you alive and to make you efficient. But they're selfish and self-centered because your brain's a selfish, self-centered survival machine. So again, just getting people to have the lens of, oh, you're you, I'm me, I'm not right, you're not right. Let's have a conversation and let me see how I should be treated. How do you want to be treated? What's your preferences? I mean, just that alone changes everything. But
it's communication, and I always support and facilitate conversation. I never go to people, this is what you should do. Let's talk about it. I'm like, what is the problem? Because I believe that if we start talking to each other, we will find, we are very intelligent creatures. We will find a solution. I have no doubt. And this is when I want to get to the point that sometimes people don't speak up either side, whoever, employee, managers, leaders, because they don't know how to communicate what their problem or what their needs are. They have no idea how to communicate it because it's so natural to them, whatever natural is like your strengths, you can't really explain how you're doing something so well because it's just natural. That's how you are wired. So not knowing, and I have seen that many, many times with HR. HR is not my favorite people. I have seen it many times in HR that the moment there is a confrontation, let's say there is an argument, because they don't know how to express themselves, so they just express it at some point.
Yeah.
You end up at bloody HR, and now you're going to have a warning. So what is it that we're teaching them? Stop talking. Yeah. Instead, in any counseling, in any psychology class, anything that we study in university in psychology, we know that people cannot express themselves, especially when they are very emotional or frustrated. It's just gonna get out. But we don't value that, and sometimes them drives me crazy. I had employees screaming, shouting, crying in the back corridor. I'm like, let's go and talk. I'm like, get it out, just get it out. I don't care, because from then onwards, we can take that information and work with it. And immediately, HR will slap you with a warning, disciplinary. No, you cannot. Any psychologist will tell you, just say it badly, but say it.
Yeah. Well, I think you just defined what psychological safety is and isn't in that last paragraph, which is psychological safety isn't a nice place, right? It's not where we're just all cordial with each other. Right? We don't really care. We just let things slip, and that's the silence, right? I always say in silence kills. So silence kills culture, silence kills leadership, silence kills relationships. People get divorced because they're not talking to each other, right? And again, so silence kills. So it's not about, but the opposite of this, there's another spectrum. So it's not about being assholes to each other. But it's about rich debate and candor, right? A psychologically safe place. There's conflict, there's tension, and it's because we see positive intent, and because we're, again, a shared belief that the team is safe from interpersonal risk taking. Risks is we're going to have a talk, we're going to have a debate. It's not going to be easy, and it's okay. And as you said, some people HR might see that as a challenge, but they need to therefore understand the concepts of psychological safety and be okay with conflict. But we're not okay with conflict. No one likes conflict.
Well, no, we don't. We don't know what to do with it.
No. The Dutch do, and the Danish do, from what I've learned.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I don't know.
Again, cultural norms, right? The Dutch and Danish are the two most candorous populations I've ever worked with. I just did a session last week. We had a bunch of Americans and a couple of Dutch in there. Just fascinating hearing them, just the ability naturally to give candid feedback without fear of anything. So this is what I think, and I'm going to say it. Whereas the Americans, we're very, very, very passive aggressive over here. We'll say nice things. How's your day? And everything's great, but I'm going to stab you in the back. So just everyone's got cultural norms. for right or for wrong.
Everybody. I'm Hungarian. We say everything, even what you don't want to hear. So, you know, I had to learn to turn it down a little bit. But you guys in the UK, I know you're British, but you live in the States. But you guys in London, you taught me when I moved, that was a cultural shock. I'm like, why don't we just say things in here? You know, no, you can't say. You need to be nice. I'm like, okay.
Very cordial.
Yes, very cordial. So, yeah, this is the problem. And I think this is how we could educate. And this is what I do normally during even my workshops, you know, to get the information out. And later on, we can have that conversation. And even if the person put it out in an inappropriate way, not acceptable way, because we don't want people going around shouting and screaming and, you know, in organization. But you can have that conversation later on and teach the person, because the next time when that happens, you can actually go to that person and say, you know, that you can tell us everything calmly as well. You don't need to have that emotional breakdown. And this is when we want the quick fix rather than the longer and training and teaching people in the long run. And this is what I always believed, like you cannot do with your one workshop or whatever it is, because that is not going to work. What other examples would you have, or reasons why people don't speak up? There are loads of examples in real life, and
I'll give you the so Amy Edmondson's 3-step process for psychological safety is: number one, set the stage. Without setting the stage appropriately, and people are on the same line of the same page of the same book, people, and without a clear reason, the why, then people will be caged up. Step two is ask for input, right? It's to your earlier point, listening. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that ratio, right? So less talking, more listening. The more that you ask, the more that it's called the Keir effect. You get people to have a say in things, the more likely they are to actually step up. And the third one, which I think you just said earlier, just now, was respond productively. If you let your emotions get the better of you, and let the amygdala hijack get the better of you, and the first thing that comes out your mouth is a swear word, and you get angry, people just, that's it. It's over. You've got to self-regulate. So for us at DX, what we did was create a very simple scientific model around, well, what do I need to do as a leader? We're all leaders at the end of the day. Whether you have direct reports or not, you still have the opportunity to influence and build trust with those around you. So what are things that the brain needs in order for it to be cognitively at ease? So if you're at cognitive stress, your threat circuitry is triggered, which you get cortisol and adrenaline, which means the brain is in an anxious place. If the brain's anxious, it will not speak up, period. So it's really easy. You just got to put brains at ease. So how do you put brains at ease? You give them the things that they need. So all 8.1 billion of us, we all crave clarity for survival purposes. So my job is to give you or anybody clarity, and not my clarity, your clarity. Some people need lots of clarity, clear expectations of why. Some don't need much clarity. So just, again, treat people how they want to be treated, but I've got to give them clarity. And it's like, for example, I was doing a facilitation a couple of weeks ago in a hotel. I know you love hotels. They had three maximum occupancy. What do you call it? Maximum occupancy notices. One said 45 people. One said 120. One said 220. I'm like, well, what is it? Because there's 75 people in here. So clarity. So of course I'm anxious because I'm like, well, what's the rules? I'm not clear on the rules. So just a simple example of without clarity. So I'm now stressed, which means I'm not at my best productive self. So just clarity is important, and we don't get clarity, we get upset. Autonomy. You asked it, listening, right? Spend more time listening. We crave autonomy. We crave the notion of being in control. Well, how do you get in control? You talk. So the person who's talking is in control. So as a leader, spend less time talking, more time listening. Really simple. Ask questions. Coaching. And everyone craves it. Some like lots of it. Some like not much of it, and something in between. And third one's relationships. We all need a sense of belonging, a sense of my attributes and my personalities and my characteristics are valued. if you don't value me, then I'm not welcome here. My brain gets upset. And the last one's equity, which is we all crave a sense of fairness, which means we have to distribute our resources and time and attention to those that need it the most, and not equally. And we just call that simply care for people. And if you care for people and give them what their brain craves consistently over time, they are more likely to speak up because their brains are at cognitive ease. So just hopefully a simple way to think through what can I do, me, whether it's my wife, my kids, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, whatever, or my coaching class or my dancing class, what do I need to do to ensure that those around me have what they need so that when we have a conversation, they speak up?
Oh yeah, definitely. And this is, sometimes you notice it when you are having these conversations, when you can speak and when you cannot speak. And it's so interesting to watch, because I attend a lot of executive meetings, and these guys are just alpha males. So you put two in the room and then it's all over. So I like watching that. And you mentioned marriage earlier, that silence kills marriage. Silence kills everything. So I prefer people arguing, than actually keeping quiet. But one of the really good, and I noticed that at work as well. So if you want to pay attention, so one of the clear signs with marriage counselors, this is data, that those marriages, those couples who are in counseling, and they roll their eyes at each other, finish.
Wow.
The marriage is unsolvable. So they cannot repair that marriage because they already stopped talking. All they do is now like, oh my God. And you see that when you start paying attention to that at work, when there is a conflict between the employee and the manager, or two managers. And when I see that one of them is rolling his or her eyes at the other, there is no going back.
Yeah.
So it's very, very difficult. And that tells me so much that the communication there has completely broken down. And to manage to save that, it would be an immense amount of work. And probably, it's just they both shut down. So pay attention to that.
Well, and people actively rolling their eyes at work is the actively disengaged, right? The disengaged employee who is bringing down a whole team because, again, someone who's rolling their eyes at work is basically they're not safe. They're in a bad place. But the sad part is they bring the whole team down as well. And we've got to stop that from happening. So I always think marriages, parenting and leadership are literally synonymous. They are one of the same thing. To be a good parent, to be a good leader, to be a good husband or wife, or a good partner is to be a good leader. Because it's just one human being working with another human being to make sure that they are being selfless and that the other person is in a good place. It's the same rules apply for nearly every facet of life. And I don't think work, I don't know what it's like culturally in Asia and where you are, but it's work should not be any different than anything else. You should come to work. You should be able to be your best self, be treated like a human being that you are, and go home less stressed than when you came. Well, I just don't understand how we've created places where that's not acceptable.
Well,
especially in hotels.
Let's go back to 100 years ago when that guy, Frederick, what was his name? He created the scientific management system. And since then we are the clogs. So let's say thank you to them. And let's say thank you to us that we still follow the 100 years old process. So this is where we are when we don't stop for a moment and Frederick Taylor, right? That was his name. Anyway. So yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about, people don't believe. And that also has sometimes the reason that they don't believe that anybody cares about their opinion. And sometimes I have that. And you know why? We also teach them. I always say each time when somebody believes something about me, at some point, I give you that message somehow. So I don't believe in, people making up stories. So let's take employee engagement surveys, okay? They give you information, those employees, they give you information. And they tell you about, let's say, bad leadership. It doesn't really matter, okay? They tell you, my manager, etc. I'm working overtime. every week, 15 hours overtime. So they give you those problems. We collect the data, we see the data, and we put aside those that are really important to those colleagues, and we action those ones that are very easy for us. Pizza party, food, yacht party here, let's go to the cinema, I give you this. And I'm like, but this is, what about this? Like, do those ones, but what about this? So this is when people say, nobody is listening to me, so why should I bother even complete the survey? Once, you know what my GM said when I was the rooms division director? He said, you better complete your engagement survey with the maximum because you're not going to get your bonus.
Oh my God.
I'm like, sure. So I gave him a 1 for everything.
Yeah, good. Yeah, you spoke up. Fantastic.
I did.
But isn't that so? Going back to psychological safety, and I see it here in America, and I can only give you what I see here, which is just take a 360. It's a wonderful way, a wonderful mechanism to get feedback. As is an engagement, any survey is a wonderful opportunity to get feedback, right? And to speak your mind. Yeah, I see it every single time. Like it's a 5-point Likert scale. They're all 4s and 5s. Then when you peel back the onion, it's not really 4s and 5s. It's just they're doing it because of fear of what if I don't do it. To your point, when your boss said that, I remember going to a manufacturing plant in a place. I can't tell you. It'd be very obvious if I say the city. It's in the New York State area, and I went to this plant. 2,000 people, huge plant, well-known organization. And we're doing a leadership session. And in the session, part of the experience was to do a little survey on each other. And we did a simulation. And in the simulation, they're failing miserably. They were just hemorrhaging money. But yet in the engagement forms, it was all 5s. I'm like, stop, just stop. You're putting 5s. Yet I know you're not. I'm watching you. You are not engaged, and your results are horrific. You're all fired for all intents and purposes, but you're engaged, or you're saying you're engaged. And you just peeled back the onion a couple of times. What I found out was the plant manager, to your same story as what you just said there. The plant manager said, if you don't put a 5, you're out the door. This plant has to be 4.8, otherwise the union's coming in, and we're all screwed. So just put 5s, for God's sake. So again, that fear, go figure, fear and setting the stage. Let's go back to Amy, setting the right stage. The stage was set for fear and having to follow a rule, but not be safe to speak up.
And this is why sometimes I actually question. I'm like, do we want to know the truth? Because I threw that question to the leaders. I threw that question to my HR VP at some point, because God knows I love her and I really respect her. She's fantastic. But she came from an environment. We bought another small company anyway, where just few hotels, so it's very easy to manage. We have 5,500 hotels. It's a machine, we have 300,000 employees. And she came from that few properties, which is very important, very easy to manage. And when she arrived to the corporate office, she became my boss. And our engagement surveys, the average, let's say 60 across the globe. And she said, next one, everybody's target is 90 in the region, Middle East and Africa. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, I respect you. You know how to do the job. You know that this is wrong. I'm like, you can't do this. So what did we get? 100s and 90s and da-da-da. I'm like, why are we lying to ourselves? What is the purpose? Because I'd rather know it's a 10, because then I know what to do, rather than a false 9. Each time when I see 90 plus, I am like, this is not true. This is not true. And I don't believe it. And this is how we train also. And unfortunately, we put that in the KPIs of our general managers, right? Employee engagement. Yeah. And of course, the moment you have a KPI, you're going to start playing around because you need to meet those goals.
There you go. And that is the problem globally is we look, simple psychology, we are what we reward. If you reward the result, I will get the result at all costs. If you reward how you get the result, then you change the whole language. So it's not about the engagement survey itself, which is a lagging indicator. It's the leading indicator of how you behave and how you set your teams up for success, the leadership capabilities. But we have failed. We are failing, because I don't know many companies that got it right yet. Very few, if any. Failing to reward leaders for doing the things that drive safe places. We don't know how to. We don't know how to. Our performance management systems are all about results. How we promote people, it's all about results. We have not figured out a way, and correct me if I'm wrong, to really figure out, well, how do we reward human behavior? How do we reward one human being treating another human being right? And until we fix that, not much changes. You get pockets of brilliance, but especially in the larger companies, there's no hope. I hate to say it, there's no hope, because when it comes down to it, again, I'm going to survive. My job, my brain's telling me, me. So if my survival of paying the bills and making sure that I got food on the table is to get a result, I will get a result at all costs.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. We haven't figured it out. And our greatest attempt is the competency framework, which I work for the boss. I work for the person who actually created it. I'm like, oh my God, kill me with your competency framework. Because now you're putting people into, this is your behavior, which I understand the principle behind, I do. But then we went, okay, so these are your financial KPIs and, 50-50 for your bonus. And these are your competency KPIs. So how you'd get the job done. So we have it in principle. We worked it out very well. So we have that. It's 50-50. However, that doesn't work out, because everybody on the competence is all of a sudden a superstar. I'm like, dude, you just shouted at your stuff like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are you? So it doesn't work. It doesn't work. But let's talk about how people speak up, because I think this is where I spend a lot of time with leaders, because even though we say people don't speak, but that's not true. People talk to you in so many different ways. When they are not talking to you, they are telling you something. When they are avoiding your meetings, they are telling you something. When your staff coming with a long face, they are trying to tell you something. When somebody breaks down and, cries or shouts, it's an accumulated, I had to tell you something, but I couldn't. Didn't know how. You were not receptive to it. And now here it is, kind of, So I never respond to words, because that's great. That's fantastic. I always like to look at the behavior. And when people say, oh, my stuff is not telling me, they are very happy. I'm like, that's a direct communication to you. That silence, that whatever, eye roll. And we don't we don't actually explain that to leaders either.
Well, yeah, agreed. And on top of that, what we don't do is we don't create the environment for leaders to reflect. We go to, so just the basic science, there's two parts of the brain, system 1, system 2. System 1 is the fast and furious part of the brain that keeps you alive, full of biases, very intuitional. System 2 is slow and deliberate and asks questions and thinks about things. So it's from Daniel Kahneman's Fast and Slow, wonderful professor.
Yeah.
So what we I don't know if it's like, again, I'll speak to America and Europe. We've just got into this habit of meeting to 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 meeting. And and I totally agree with you, in order to do what you just said, which is to look, hear, and understand what the hell is going on around you, you need time. And if you don't have white space in your calendar where you've got half an hour each day, well, what are people saying? What are those non-verbal cues that you just talked about? Oh my gosh, they're saying nothing. Well, that's a problem. I need to go. But unless you're thinking about the work versus just doing the work, then this never happens. And I think that's a cultural problem. Unless we solve for that, all of this stuff is just theory, because you need time and energy in order to look at and hear people and listen to them and see what's going on. And again, my boss needs to give me the time to do that, and my boss's boss needs to give them the time. Again, I'll always go back to this is still a culture problem. if you don't value thinking time, if you don't value human interaction, then it's just going to be work. And until we fix, again, if we don't fix that, all of our hard work and what you and I do just really gets wasted, because you need time. It's always time to do this stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. We just firefight. We go from one thing to another, and there is so little time for the employees, for conversations, really. And what I wanted to touch upon, another one, and maybe that's the topic that we can talk about and then close, is the collective illusion, because I'm on to this topic these days, and I will send you, oh my God, you're going to hate me for this. I will send you a report, because I just went through the report before this. But collective illusion is really all about the conflict between what an individual believes that is important for him or for her, and what he or she believes what is important for the group. And going along with what is important with the group, because we believe what is important, what we see out there, and everybody tends to talk about, that is important for everyone. So, for example, jobs, right? You need to have a prestigious job. Everybody wants fame, wants wealth, wants career, etc., etc. And in this report is actually fame. If you even, I don't know how old your kids are, but you ask them, do you want to be everybody wants to be famous these days. That's the message even I receive, I just want to be on social media. And you ask them why, they don't really know. It's just because that's the collective illusion. But when they did that survey, it's actually ranked the last, 76th place. Nobody wants to be famous. Yet, our illusion, collective illusion, leads us to believe that everybody wants to be famous. Now, how do we apply this theory at the workplace? And I will send you this report, because this is fantastic. And you will hate it. Because what do we hear constantly in organizations, right? Everybody needs feedback. It's very important to people. It's very important for people to have a good understanding and clear vision of the company. It's very important. Leadership is very important to people. Well-being, diversity, incorporating minorities into the workforce. Out of 65, it's all down the bottom. Nobody cares about that. So when I read this, I'm like, then we are talking to the wrong, we are delivering the wrong message. Or what is the situation in here? So how do we apply this theory in the workplace? Do we follow collective illusion and it's not even true? And what are the collective illusions that we have in the workplace? One could be that I cannot speak up. And we had precedences in the past, examples, when people actually spoke up, it was okay. And they felt really good about themselves. And there was result. I always speak up. And sometimes I got burned. Sometimes it was okay. Sometimes I got a big slap on my face. Like, why are you talking? But how much of a collective illusion do we have in relation to silence? I would question that now, after this report.
Doesn't this still come back to the same old argument that culture is a mirror of leadership? What you basic mirror neurons. So collective illusion is when the masses do something, then everyone else follows. So just there's a tipping point to where enough people do something, it becomes if they're doing it, I'm going to do it. I want to be famous too. But they don't want to be famous. But and then there's a wonderful case study of monkeys and water. And I saw a video the other week. Yes,
that's the culture, the 5 monkeys.
Yeah, same thing. Exactly. So we'll go back to the same old argument. When an executive team says, this is the culture, these are our cultural norms, we reward good, we will consequence bad, we will model it. Basic mirror neurons, the VPs will then do it because they have to. And then it becomes the collective illusion, not an illusion, the collective, when enough people get over the tipping point, it becomes the new cultural norm. And I think that's what we just, it ain't going to happen unless the top do it. If the top require psychological safety, expect people to speak up. There'll be no repercussions if people speak up. Because again, going back to the original definition that we started with, a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking. I can take a risk and I know I won't be consequences. There's no repercussions. I will not be chastised. And if the moment that you do chastise someone, it's over. So just, again, but therefore we need to create boundaries and structure. Things don't happen naturally, but it starts at the top. Culture is a mirror of leadership. And if you require these things, then they will happen. And model them, then require them, then consequence them, then reward them. And psychological safety in stopping silence is exactly that. You've got to be inclusive. You've got to listen more. You've got to ask questions. You've got to create clarity. You've got to give the benefit of the doubt. You've got to do the human stuff, but you've got to reward the human stuff in order for that to happen. Otherwise, silence just continues to manifest itself in our corporations. And end of the day, silence. When I say silence kills leadership, what I mean by that is people leave. And what are we seeing? People leaving.
People are leaving, and many times the message is nobody's listening to me. Nobody's telling, nobody hears what I have to say, and it's literally sometimes it's all about talking next to each other, past each other. One is saying that, the other is saying that, and you know what? Sometimes I see that in leaders, and that always drives me crazy when you deliver a message. Okay, doesn't matter what it is, and I like to teach that to leaders. When you are receiving a message, and they immediately want to respond, and they come up with all sorts, and it's not even excuses; it's the defense. Yeah, we can't do this because of that. Yeah, it happened because of that. Yeah, I'm like, sometimes you don't need to talk. Like, just keep quiet. Like, you don't need to respond. And we trained, unfortunately, I don't know if we trained leaders or they trained themselves. I really don't know. That they need to provide a solution to everything. Sometimes people just want to tell you something.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's a law of least efforts, right? So just we're wired with it, right? It's quicker and easier for me to do it myself than it is to allow others to think of it themselves. We're all hardwired with that. Yeah.
No, definitely. We're finding the easiest way.
which is why the world needs us, okay? We need to be retrained to rethink, to be less selfish, to be more selfless. And that's what this all comes down to. Again, none of us were born to be leaders. We are ineffective human beings. We are designed for ourselves, and we need to be retrained, or in some cases just trained. And basic schema theory, we've got to take some of the pre-existing habits that we're wired with and replace those with selfless habits to make us to create psychological safety, because people will not speak up unless they feel and know they're going to be treated well, and there's no repercussions for speaking up. But that means the good news is we've got millions of people who need to be trained.
Millions of people need to be talked to, and building trust, right? Because the core of psychological safety is trust. If there is no trust, then so maybe we should start with that. Well, Alex, we definitely have our hands full with that bunch out there. And thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed. So I think the takeaway is that more listening, less talking, and the consequences. I always say that if there is no consequences for what I'm going to say, then I likely to speak up again and again and again. And also consequences for the leaders who are not willing to listen to their staff. What is it that companies are going to do about that? Because we need to approach that problem from so many different angles. So it's a multi-dimension strategy that we need to apply for that. Thank you so much. And I hope to talk to you again about something else.
It's a healthy discussion. So no, I appreciate it. And it's your evening, my morning, but no, thanks for the questions. It's a wonderful topic. Silence kills, let's just be honest. So let's stop it from happening.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, Alex.
Welcome.